to be in Exodus chapter 16. And before we get into that, there's this top paragraph on the right I just wanted us to read together. And it says, if life were nothing but tests, we would be discouraged. If life were all pleasures, we would never learn discipline or develop character. The Lord knows how to balance the experiences of life. And that's from Warren Wiersbe. Does that not really explain the expanse of a person's life? That if all we had were trial after trial after trial after trial and never had any pleasures of the Lord, then it would just always discourage us, wouldn't it? And yet, if all we ever had were the pleasures of life, we'd be spoiled, rotten brats, right? That's the Lonny translation there, okay? And so this kind of leads us into where we're going here with the Israelites and their continued journey through Exodus. And so I kind of, in that next section there, use these phrases to describe what we're going to run into. We're hungry. We have no food. Egypt was way better. And you did this to us, right? So let's go ahead and start reading in verse 16, starting with chapter 16, verse 1. Then the whole community of Israel set out from Elim and journeyed into the wilderness of Sin. Now I wanted to stop right there for a second. Anytime we see the word sin, what do we think of? We think of sin, right? Why would we make such a correlation? But there's something that I wanted to point out here is that the valley of sin, the wilderness of sin, was they're not talking about sinfulness or evil in that case. This is where they're heading. Who can remember where they're heading from this point? Mount Sinai. Okay, so the wilderness of sin refers to Sinai. Okay, so that very first three letters of Sinai is S-I-N. That is what they're referring to here. So I wanted to bring that out because some people, when they read this, they think they're in this horrible heathen area surrounded by just terrible sinful nature and things like that. But that's not the case. Between Elim and Mount Sinai, they arrived there on the 15th day of the second month, 1 month after leaving the land of Egypt. Who remembers how long they traveled from Egypt to Elim? They got thirsty and whiny, and after how many days of travel? 3 days, right? So it took them 3 days to travel to Elim. I don't know how long they stayed in Elim. I don't think it says in here. Nope. And so, but now we're like a month in from when they left Egypt. All right. The whole community of Israel complained about Moses and Aaron. If only the Lord had killed us back in Egypt, they moaned. There we sat around pots filled with meat and ate all the bread we wanted. Now you have brought us into this wilderness to starve us all to death. Okay? So really what they are accusing Moses of is mass genocide. You have brought us all here to kill us. That's what they're basically saying here, right? All too often, we find ourselves in a position where we need to take a 360 look at our life, okay? And this is what I mean by a 360 life. We need to start out, look at the circumstance we're in, our present, right? Take inventory of what's going on. Then we need to turn around and we need to look into our past. And we need to look and see what has happened in my past that is like what's happening today. Okay? Once we do that, we need to look and see, in those similar circumstances, what actions did we take? And based on those actions, what were the outcomes? Okay? So if we do all of those things, what can we surmise about what we've done in the past? Did it work or did it not work, right? So if it did work and it worked well, what should we do now, shortly in the future, with our current circumstance? We should do it again, right? Okay? If it didn't work, and it's proven over and over and over and over again that it didn't work, what should we do in our near future? Don't do it. Try something else, right? And in that try something else, as Christians, we need to pray. Sometimes we don't need to pray because God told us when, in the past, what we were supposed to do, and did we do it, right? So that's what I mean by taking a 360 look, is evaluate what we've done, evaluate where we've been, and try and not keep going around that mountain, right? And if we do that, we will find out that our journey doesn't have to be as long as it may have to be, right? That's something the Israelites are getting very close to finding out. Okay? That's a little spoiler alert in case you didn't know, right? All right. So this is where the Israelites have found themselves. We're in discomfort, right? Let's think back last week or 2 weeks ago. Let's see, was last week Thanksgiving? No, that was 2 weeks ago. Last week, I have to get my weeks right. What was it that the Israelites found their condition? That was two times ago. Last week they were just getting to Elam, and they found out what? Water was bad. We don't have anything to drink. Moses, you brought us out here to die. We're going to thirst to death. We would have been way better in Egypt, right? And what did God do? He provided a way, didn't he? Okay? So let's go back now 2 more weeks right before Thanksgiving. Now, where did we find the Israelites? At the Red Sea. Okay? What situation did they find themselves in? Why was that an issue? Okay, they were trapped, right? Had the Red Sea to one side, they had mountains to the other, and they had Pharaoh to the other. They were trapped. Okay? And what did they say? Moses, why did you bring us out here to die? Pharaoh's going to kill us. We would have been better off if we had stayed in Egypt, right? Okay? So let's back up. We don't know how, I don't remember how many, but throughout all of the, right before all of the plagues, where did the Israelites find themselves before the first plague? Slaves to Pharaoh doing what? Making bricks with what? With nothing, no straw, right? Moses, why have you... Okay, so they have found themselves in this same situation, not exact, but you can correlate them, right? Over and over and over again, and they have done what? The same thing, almost verbatim, with the exception of the conditions, right? I know it, don't we all? It has become their default, right? How many of us have defaults in our life? Yeah. I had a pastor, and he he came from a rough life, and he did a lot of building and things like that. And when he was saved, he was out working with some people. They were building something. I don't remember what it was right off the top of my head. But they were building something, and somebody dropped a hammer from the top of a ladder, came down, hit him on top of the head. And all he did, he sucked air, and he just said, "Oh, bless God." He was the only things that could come out of his mouth. After the day of work was done, the guy that dropped the hammer came down and asked him what had changed in his life. He's like, "What do you mean?" He's like, 10 years ago, if I had dropped that hammer on your head, you would have come after me with the hammer, and I might not have survived. He had a horrible, horrible anger, prone to fight. I mean, he could be a violent man. And that witness of how he changed his life through Christ led that man to Christ. And so anytime that we can find a way to realize what our circumstances are, take our 360 and change where we go from there, it doesn't just better our own life. It proclaims who God is. All right. As we look back at the study that we've done in Exodus, there are many circumstances that resemble where we are today, right? We just went through that in Edom, at the Red Sea. All right, and if we fast forward, we would be able to see, some more as we move forward. Okay, let's continue on to verse 4 now. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Look, I'm going to rain down food from heaven for you. Each day, the people can go out and pick up as much food as they need for the day. I'm going to test them to see whether or not they follow my instructions." Verse 5. On the 6th day, they will gather food, and when they prepare it, there will be twice as much as there is usually. Then Moses added, let me back up here for a second. So this is what God has said. All right, I'm going to jump forward to verse 8 for a second. Then Moses added, "The Lord will give you meat to eat every evening and bread to satisfy you in the morning, for he has heard your complaints against him. What have we done?" Meaning him and Aaron. Okay? "What have we done? Yes, your complaints are against the Lord, not against us." Then the Lord said to Moses, "I have heard the Israelites' complaints. Now tell them in the evening you will have meat to eat, and in the morning you will have all the bread you want. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God." All right, so this section is trust the Lord to supply. Okay? So God will supply our needs. That's one of his promises to us. And as we listen for and hold on to the promises that God makes in our life, it'll help us to turn tests into trials into experiences. We just have to have enough time and space around those in order to make that transition. So why do you think I talk about tests into trials into experiences? Okay, without a test, you don't have a testimony. Think about the severity. If you're having a test, you don't like tests. Not many do, right? If you're having a trial, is that more than a test or less than a test? It could be more. Okay, if you have an experience, is that more than a test or a trial or less than a test or a trial? It could depend on the experience, but as far as the way the word lands on you, does it land like a ton of bricks or does it land much more gentle? Much more gentle, right? And so as we face the same thing over and over and over again, the longer we live with Christ and the more that we're able to correctly respond to those things get less and less severe in our life, right? It's like, oh, I've been here before. I know how this is going to turn out. We're good, right? After the 37th time. Like I say, hopefully it doesn't take that many, but sometimes, right? Okay, so what was God's promise? He promised them food. How did he say the food was going to come? It's going to come in the morning, how? Okay, it was going to come down from heaven. It was going to rain down, as some translations say, okay? And in our journey of life, we need to live on God's promises rather than on the explanations, okay? Anybody ever make a decision for your kids or others or whatever, and their response is why? Never, right? It does not happen. It's like a complete foreign concept to all of us, right? Okay? I know it. Okay. A lot of times, why is just we want to know more, right? But sometimes, why goes beyond that, okay? Amy used to tell our kids if she made a decision for them to that they had to do something, and if they came back and said why, she could tell in the tone and in what the circumstances were that were leading to that what why really meant. I want to get out of this whole thing, so I'm going to push back, right? And maybe if I push back enough and hard enough, your answer will change for what I perceive as my betterment, right? Amy had this great little phrase that she would turn as she comes up with so many, and she would say, "You don't really want why. You want me to change my answer, and that's not happening." Yep. And then you'd go on about your business, and exactly. That's kind of like my grandfather had this one. A pig says, "Huh?" Pull his tail. He says, "Uh-huh." And it's like you sit there. It's like, what? So, exactly. So it's common and it's normal for us to ask why, isn't it? If you don't ask why, it's because you either have been here before and you know what's coming, right? Or you haven't been here before and you want to know what's coming. Okay. So let's move on to verse. These are a little out of order. We're going to do verses 6, 7, 9, and 10. 9 and 10 now. So Moses and Aaron said to all the people of Israel, "By evening you will realize it was the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt. In the morning you will see the glory of the Lord, because he has heard your complaints, which are against him, not us." Have you noticed that Moses is like repeating himself too, just like God has to repeat himself, right? He's learned this knack. Then Moses said to Aaron, verse 9, Announce this to the entire community of Israel. Present yourselves before the Lord, for he has heard your complaining. And as Aaron spoke to the whole community of Israel, they looked out toward the wilderness, and they could see the awesome glory of the Lord in the cloud. Okay? So God's glory was presented to them. I don't know if have I ever shared my experience of the pillar of fire and cloud that I've seen once. I forget who I've told, so I didn't. You might have, yeah. Yeah. So I was on a trip with the quartet, and we were flying to Miami, And on the way to Miami, I got bumped up to first class. And I didn't know that I had got bumped to first class until the attendant came back and said, you need to buckle your seatbelt because we're getting ready to leave. And I was like, oh, I get to stay here. That's awesome. On the way on the way down, the pilot had to make a huge detour around a supercell storm. And so I was looking out the window, and I've never seen this before, and I've never seen it again. But at the center of this massive storm cell, there was this pillar of cloud that came. It was like an upside down tornado. Came from the top basin of the clouds, shot way above where the airplane was. And so, you can just imagine how tall this thing must have been. And the whole thing was just turning and churning and churning like this the whole way up. And the sun was hitting it, and it looked like it was inferno. And instantly I saw that, and I thought, man, I wonder if that's what the Israelites saw. Because it was just this amazing, amazing sight. And so they talk about that the heavens will declare the glory of God. And if you think about the manna, it came from heaven, declaring the glory of God. As we'll read here in a little while, I'll pause on that. So the glory of God will be revealed. All right? We're going to continue down to verse 13. And this is showing God's faithfulness. Okay? What is faithfulness? We throw the word around all the time. What is faithfulness? It's being steady in what you do and what you say. It's dedication, loyalty, and it's, you basically know what's going to happen because it's always happened this way, right? Okay, so this is God's faithfulness, okay? And I added some words to this, reconfirmed. Because has God shown the Israelites that he was faithful? Yes, at each time that they've faced this type of calamity before, right? So verse 13, that evening, vast numbers of quail flew in and covered the camp. And the next morning, the area around the camp was wet with dew. And when the dew evaporated, a flaky substance as fine as frost blanketed the ground. The Israelites were puzzled when they saw it. What is it? They asked each other. They had no idea what it was. So let me ask everyone in here. Does anybody know what manna is? Okay. So the funny thing about the word manna, it literally means, what is it? The Israelites didn't know. They went out and they looked at it and said, what is this? So what manna ended up being was like a very fine grain or seed-like substance. But when they ate it, it was sweet, like honey. And if you can imagine, that's, for the most part, all they had for 40 years. And they weren't sick, and they had the energy to move from place to place and to do what God said. So if you can imagine what an amazing food source that must have been, because it met all of their the needs of their body. Okay? So what is it? Okay? That what is it is where manna comes from. And they had no idea what it was. And Moses told them, it is the food the Lord has given you to eat. All right? Psalms verse 78 refers to manna as the bread of angels. Okay? And there are several references throughout Scripture that talk about manna and what it was. Even when Jesus was teaching, people asked him, send us manna from heaven so that we can see this as a miracle. Anybody remember that story? It was shortly after the 5 loaves and 2 fishes when he fed the 5,000. And when they asked him to show them manna from heaven, Jesus' response was, I am the bread from heaven. Okay? And so, in what ways can we compare and contrast, let's say, manna that was given in Exodus versus Jesus who came in the New Testament? Okay, manna was everything that their bodies needed, and Jesus was everything that our soul needed. Okay, that's a good comparison. What else can we think of? Second more, and then I'll... Okay, so Jesus said he was the bread of life. What kind of life? Eternal life, right? Manna was the bread of life for living while they were alive on earth, but that wasn't eternal, was it? Okay, it goes back to the whole spiritual aspect. So good. Manna was for life for a short period. Jesus was for eternal life. Who was it that received the manna? The Israelites. Who is it that received Jesus? Just the Jewish people? Jesus came for the world, right? So in this, the manna was for just a small people group, even though it was a big group of people, right? It was still a small people group. Jesus came for everyone. He wasn't selective in who that was delivered to. How did they have to gather the manna? Okay, that's how much they had to gather. How would they have to gather it? Yeah, that's what she's saying there. Yeah, she's like, let's caught it on their tongues. Okay, where was it scattered? It was on the ground. So what did they have to do to pick it up? They had to bend over. They had to stoop, didn't they? Okay, when we come to Jesus, we have to humble ourselves in order to receive his salvation. Manna did go bad. Yep. And because manna went bad, each day they had to go and collect fresh manna. Okay? In our spiritual lives, each day we need to replenish our spirit by taking in more of Jesus, our daily bread. Okay? So those are some correlations between the manna that God provided to the people of Israel and to the bread of life that Jesus is to all the people of the earth. Again, provided by God. All right. So we're going to move on to did we read all of 13 through 15? Yes, we did. Okay. On to verse 16. Okay? Now, these are God's instructions. Anything that God ever gave that was new, he gave instructions. Why do you think that's important? Because you wouldn't know what to do, right? So here's this new food source. God is saying, here's how you handle it, here's how you manage it, here's how you get it, all these things. So these are the Lord's instructions, verse 16. Each household should gather as much as it needs. Pick up 2 quarts for each person in your tent. So the people of Israel did as they were told. Some gathered a lot, some only a little. But when they measured it out, everyone had just enough. Those who gathered a lot had nothing left over, and those who gathered very little had enough. Each family had just what they needed. Then Moses told them, "Do not keep any of it until morning." But some of them didn't listen, and kept some of it until morning. One of the commentaries, I'm going to pause there for a second. One of the commentaries that I read there said that, it might talk about this later, I don't remember, that when the manna would come, the Israelites only had so much time to gather it, because once the heat of the day hit it, it would evaporate and it would go away, whatever was left on the ground. So they had to rise in the morning early. There was no sleeping in. And so they were talking that some of the people maybe didn't want to have to work so hard every single day to get what they needed. So if they got just a little bit extra, they could sleep in, they could take it easy in the morning, and then go out and get what they needed for the rest of the day, or just wait till the next day, right? And this was God's way of instilling in them good habits of life, so that they did not become slothful people waiting to be waited on, expecting the goodness of their neighbors to feed them all the time, right? Kind of like what we saw in the New Testament church, right? Where people were spending their whole days in the church just praying, not working, not doing anything to provide for others, but expected to everybody else to feed them because of them being such good prayers or whatever. Okay? It's interesting how, mankind is mankind. We don't change. Verse 19. Then Moses told them, "Don't keep any," but some of them didn't listen and kept it any. But by morning, it was full of maggots and had a terrible smell, and Moses was very angry with them. After this, the people gathered the food morning by morning, each family according to its need. And as the sun became hot, the flakes that had not been picked up melted and disappeared. And on the 6th day, they gathered twice as much as usual, 4 quarts for each person instead of 2. Then all the leaders of the community came and asked Moses for an explanation. And he told them, "This is what the Lord has commanded. Tomorrow will be a day of complete rest, a holy Sabbath set apart for the Lord. So bake or boil as much as you want today, and set aside what is left for tomorrow." So they put some aside until morning, just as Moses had commanded. And in the morning, the leftover food was wholesome and good, without maggots and or odor. Yeah. Moses said, "Eat this food today, for today is a Sabbath day dedicated to the Lord. There will be no food on the ground today. You may gather the food for 6 days, but the 7th day is the Sabbath. There will be no food on the ground today." Some of the people went out anyway on the Sabbath day, but they found no food. And the Lord asked Moses, "How long will these people refuse to obey my commands and instructions? They must realize that the Sabbath is the Lord's gift to you." Stop there for a little bit. What is the Sabbath? It is a gift for us. And if we fast forward to Jesus' day, what had the Sabbath become? A day of obligation, right? Here's all the things that you have to avoid doing. Here's how you have to do what few things you get to do, right? It's no longer a gift. It's now a religious obligation and a burden on people. And so when we think of these things, a lot of times the things that God gives us as gifts, we take and we turn it and pervert it into something it was never meant to be. Because in this case, what did God do so that they could have a holy Sabbath? Didn't send the manna. He provided it early, right? But they were already set to be able to enjoy the Sabbath the way God intended it. Let's see. That is why he gives you a 2-day supply on the 6th day. Last part of verse 29. So there will be enough for 2 days. On the Sabbath day, you must each stay in your place. Do not go out and pick up food on the 7th day. So the people did not gather any food on the 7th day. The Israelites called the food named manna. It was white like coriander seed, but it tasted like honey wafers. So that is all we get about manna. Check, did I miss anything? All right. Much better than rice cakes, I'm sure. Oh, the matzah? Oh, yes. Yeah, I used to refer to some of the wafers that some of those prepackaged communion things have as the peanuts that dissolve in water. They're made out of cornstarch. Yeah, that is like it goes away, and that was all. We'll get you some more, Corey. We'll fix you right up. Tell Christina, here's Corey's breakfast for the next month. You got to get up early, though, or it's going to disappear. So if so, the honey got lost somewhere in the recipe. All right. So now, the next section, we're talking about remembering the seasons that God teaches us, or the lessons that God teaches us. Then Moses said, "This is what the Lord God has commanded. Fill a 2-quart container with manna to preserve it for your descendants. Then later generations will be able to see the food that I gave you in the wilderness when I set you free from Egypt." Moses said to Aaron, "Get a jar and fill it with 2 quarts of manna. Then put it in a sacred place before the Lord to preserve it for all future generations." Aaron did as the Lord had commanded Moses. He eventually placed it in the Ark of the Covenant, in front of the stone tablets inscribed with the terms of the covenant. So the people of Israel ate manna for 40 years until they arrived at the land where they would settle. They ate manna until they came to the border of the land of Canaan. The container used to measure the manna was an omer, which was 1/10 of an ephah. It held about 2 quarts. So here's something that you need to realize about verse 32 through 36. Has the Ark of the Covenant been created yet? Nope, it won't here for a little while. Okay, but it's almost like whoever when Moses was writing this or transcribing it or however it was done back then, he said, after the fact, we're going to go back here and we're going to add this little glimpse into the future, because we need to be able to remember the lessons that God teaches us. All right. So the Ark of the Covenant, also called the Ark of Testimony. Okay. So it was the throne of God when they were in the wilderness. Okay? Later on, when the tabernacle was built, it was put inside the Holy of Holies. Only Moses during his lifetime got to go into the Holy of Holies. And then only once a year could one of the priests go in to do their annual annual rituals. Okay, and this is where God's presence would settle when they were to stay in one place, and when God's presence left that seat, the pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire. Remember, that's what his presence was represented as to the people. When it would start moving, then they would know it's time to pack up camp and go. And so, so in the seat, like they said, they put the 10 Commandments, right, the 2 tablets of the law, and they put the jar of manna. Anybody know what the third thing was? Yep, Aaron's staff that budded fresh buds. Okay, that was put in there too, because Moses wanted all of those things to be visual reminders of what God did and how he miraculously provided for them over and over and over and over again. I'm surprised he didn't put his sandals in there that were 40 years old to show that they were as good as the day he put them on too. Because it said over 40 years their sandals never wore out. God provided in so many ways. All right. So God had kept, what words did I put on that paper? All right. So God had them put these items in there to prevent what Amy refers to as soul amnesia. Okay? So I'm going to read this little tidbit from Warren Wiersbe's commentary here. Most people are prone to forget the way God has dealt with them, and they have to learn again the lessons they've forgotten. Some keep a journal and review it regularly, while others keep a spiritual diary in the margins of their Bibles. Noting special verses and experiences related to them. A photograph that may mean little to us conveys treasures of spiritual truth to the owner, who knows why the photo is on the shelf. However we do it, we need to nail down the important lessons of life and permit them to influence us to walk with God and obey him. Okay? This takes us back 360. It's taking a 360 look around our lives. And if we can remember to do that, we can keep from having to walk around a wilderness for a whole year, for 2 years, for 10 years, for our whole life, trying to figure out, how do I get out of this? And we all know people that they hit the same thing. They walk into the exact same burning building, have the same exact experience, and don't understand why. Right? Expecting a different result. Yep. And so it's more than just our physical, natural lives that's at stake with that. Because at some point, God decides enough is enough, and the chances that we have to correct that are no more. And so there's some questions at the end here. A couple of them we're going to go over as a group, and some of them are just meant for self-reflection. Okay. Particularly the second one. What challenging experiences are you now facing that will hopefully help you mature and glorify God? That is the true reason of tests. It's so that at the end of it, we have something to glorify God with. It's not to punish us. It's not to trap us into doing something that we're not supposed to do. It's all intended for us to be able to turn to someone and glorify God through the test that we went through. Okay. The third one, what is the difference between the Lord testing and the devil's tempting? Devil's tempting is typically done through fear. Lord's testing is done for his glory. Okay? Devil's tempting is there, its purpose, that's the word I'm looking for. Its purpose is to take us backwards in our life and not to let us move forward, whereas as the Lord's testing is meant for us to be able to jump that hurdle and propel further forward in life. Good. Yep. Anybody else have any? So when the Lord tests us in something, he's breaking new ground in our life. He's trying to get us to go into new areas of our life, whereas temptation is making us rehash old ground, right? Bury it, bury whatever happens deeper, and repeating that same ground over and over again. Good. God's tests give us opportunity to walk in faith. An opportunity to show what we've learned is kind of the yep. And if you think about any test in school, that's its purpose, is to find out what you've learned, right? So the devil's tempting is more on our failures, and God's testing is for his to show his faithfulness, and okay. All right. So a couple of other ones in there, especially that second one, that second question in there. Really evaluate that this week and think through that as you move forward this week, so that hopefully next week you're on some fresh ground, right? So we'll go ahead and close with prayer.